And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. The federal government passed the Medical Care Act in 1966, which offered to reimburse or cost share one-half the provincial and territorial costs of medical services provided by a doctor outside hospitals. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 2000.
The idea for a family health care clinic began sometime last April. Close to a dozen Smithers doctors became disillusioned with the healthcare system and the physical and emotional demands being placed on them. So they got together and formed a committee of sorts and came up with a plan to build a family healthcare clinic beside the Bulkley Valley Hospital. But shortly after their idea was taken to the Health Council for review, the process came to a sudden halt. The Health Council says it needed time to consult with the Health Ministry and discuss the feasibility of the project. But Dr. Andrew Kataska, who represents the doctors in favor of the clinic, thinks they were stalling. The situation came to a head several weeks ago at a public forum.
Our proposal was an attempt to, rather than reactively respond to a crisis, to proactively prevent it. And I think we can do that.
I would like to address a few key issues, and I hope in so doing that I will increase your understanding of the entire situation. I feel strongly, as does the entire Health Council, that some perspective has been lost in this process, and we would like to see that perspective regained.
So how and why did the situation between the Health Council and the doctors deteriorate enough to warrant the need for a public forum?
The deterioration of healthcare across the north has been spiraling, and it's hard to imagine it getting any lower. And the process that we'd entered into in terms of trying to get this clinic going has just slowed down, and it's been happening in a very non-public arena. And we thought it was time for the public to become aware of it and throw their support behind it and give the Health Council all the empowerment it needs, give it the mandate to actually make something happen.
At the forum, several doctors and members of the local Health Council attempted to explain their positions, why the doctors felt the need to call the meeting, and why the Health Council felt their position was being misinterpreted. Kataska says he also felt there was a lack of communication between them and the Council on the proposal. But Council Chair Sharon Smith disagrees.
We asked to meet with them and see them at one of their meetings and where we presented our initial proposal, and we've actually been sending letters to them repeatedly. And things have been happening that we're unaware of. We haven't been privy to the process. To certain parts of the process.
When the doctors first brought the proposal to us in April, we actually formulated a committee. We had Dr. Wilson from the Health Council sit on the committee, and Shirley Bouchard, our administrator, sit on the committee, and then Andy Howard from the Town Council sat on it with two physicians to work towards it. I think the difficulty is when you are looking at land, and especially Minister of Health land, there's a lot of issues and red tape around it, and so you have to try and work through them, and that sometimes can be frustrating.
Dr. Andrew Kataska says so far the Bulkley Valley Health Council has been less than cooperative. But Chair Sharon Smith says they are in favor of the proposed clinic. One sticking point does remain, however, and that is the proposed location. Kataska says the land immediately adjacent to the hospital is zoned to allow for the medical clinic to be built and in the future expanded. But the land offered by the Health Council is a residential lot. Kataska says this would require rezoning, public process, and more than 10,000 pedestrian crossings of 8th Avenue per year. But he adds the doctors will abide by what the community feels is best. And despite the requirement of a long-term planning process for the land next to the hospital by the Health Ministry, Kataska feels if they have the support of the Health Council, they will be able to secure the land. But even now, he's not holding his breath.
We just want it to happen, and we're tired of pushing against something that seems to move very slowly. And so, even if we have to pay for it ourselves.
But even though both parties seemed to come to somewhat of a stalemate at the meeting, the full-to-capacity crowd, for the most part, seemed in favor of the plan, including the proposed location next to the hospital. But many also said if the plans don't get off the ground and the doctors don't stay in Smithers, there won't be a need for the clinic.
I don't want to end up in an ambulance or a medevac jet going to Prince George or Vancouver or Seattle or whoever will take me because my obstetrician left a month before.
It seems to me that we're not going to need an expansion of the hospital if we don't have any doctors to fill it.
So what will it take for this idea to become a reality? Sharon Smith says more cooperation on behalf of both parties. What is it going to take to put this idea into reality?
It's going to take us sitting down again with the physicians, actually defining, what they're looking at, taking it to the ministry and seeing what we can work out. They're talking adjacent to the hospital. They don't want it across the road. We've heard from the community they're not so sure that's such a good location. Can we look at the footprint? Is there another option on that existing land? But what does it take?
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The term bed and breakfast originated after the Second World War. In the 1940s, many people from overseas needed places to stay, so local people offered rooms in their homes and served breakfast to those overnight guests. Let us return to the archives to hear why some people open a bed and breakfast.
Being a proprietor of a bed and breakfast is more than just being a housekeeper and cook. It's a lifestyle. Most B&B operators decide to start up a bed and breakfast because they like dealing with people. But there always seems to be another reason behind their decision.
Because we are by ourselves now. My kid is gone. And I thought I've opened bed and breakfast, I could meet lots of people. And it's true, I met so nice people from all over, from Europe, from United States, of course from Canada too. And my house is from them house to my house.
Initially we had to move due to family circumstances, and it fit into that plan, so we purchased a house that could accommodate a bed and breakfast at a future point.
Basically, it was something Lucille had always wanted to do. We've always really enjoyed meeting people. It seemed a natural thing. We like entertaining people.
Although a background in hospitality is an asset, the experience of many B&B operators varies.
I have been in the hospitality industry most of my life, or a good chunk of my life, so I knew quite a bit about that part of it, the hotel and restaurant business.
Only the experience of serving meals to and entertaining friends and company, family. And we'd had some experience at operating a home-based business before, but nothing directly at bed and breakfast.
Some bed and breakfasts are just that, a warm bed and a continental breakfast. But at most, they offer something unique.
Lots of comfort. Home-style meals, good beds, quiet nights.
The people like it. It is big property, so they can have lots of rooms to walk, to enjoy themselves. I make every day different breakfast, and I always ask they can choose from different dishes.
Our home has a sauna, cedar sauna, and a jacuzzi. We offer office space to business people and an internet connection, as well as we have a large sun deck and used to the people in the summertime with quite a nice mountain view.
Bed and breakfasts in the Northwest cater to tourists from the local region, the country, and the world.
I have from France, from Luxembourg, from Belgium, from Germany, from United States, they are fishermen. Somebody, of course, I have from Canada too. And they came from May to October.
We've had people from so many countries all over the world that come into Kitimat, and it's only our second year in business, and to meet in such a wide range of people in such a short time.
We've had a real mixed bag. We've had people that come here on contract to all the different companies. We've had many engineers, that kind of clientele.
Catering to an international clientele can cause some difficulties, whether it be language barriers or time zones.
Yeah, one time I have midnight, I have called and they said, do you have bed and breakfast? I said, yes. From Germany they called because the time is different. And they came here and stayed about 1 week.
Every bed and breakfast operator has a story about a unique situation they've encountered or an interesting guest that has stayed with them.
There was one couple last year. They were a brother and sister from Germany, but they were living at opposite ends of the world pretty well. The brother and his wife were living in Germany, and the sister and husband were living in Australia. So they flew into Los Angeles, met each other in Los Angeles, and then rented a car and found their way all the way up to Kitimat. So that was sort of fascinating. We've even had a group of Italian fishermen take over our whole kitchen and cook up their own pasta one evening.
The length of a guest stay depends on what the purpose of the guest stay is. Some are on vacation while others are working.
Usually they stay for 2 weeks, from 1 week to 2 weeks, because when they come from different countries, from Europe, there's no sense they come for a few days.
The longest would be typically with the hurricane shutdown, and that would be up to 3 weeks. But typically with tourists, it'll be just overnight up to maybe 3 days.
To reach out to potential guests, B&B operators have to use a variety of marketing tools, from guidebooks to the internet.
I advertise through the chamber, primarily as a member, as well as on the internet. We have our own webpage and through a brochure.
We're registered with the Kitimat Chamber of Commerce, and that's probably one of our best sources, through right at the Tourist Information Bureau on the entrance to Kitimat, and we're on their website on the internet.
In internet, and from other people.
Many bed and breakfast operators ask guests to sign a guest book.
It's memories on people that come to the house and where they're from. Usually when they come into the house, we settle them all in, and then we discuss what they do for a living. And just interesting, there's so many people out there. And in our career of running this, we'll just barely touch a few of them.
With the tourism industry about to really take flight in northwestern British Columbia, municipal governments across the region are looking at ways to regulate the bed and breakfast industry. In some communities, such as Prince Rupert, B&Bs must have a business license and must pass an accredited inspection.
Well, we don't have regulations right now that allow this use, so it becomes difficult to encourage that use in zones where that actually is not a use that's permitted. So I think that in addition to establishing some regulatory frameworks, new regulations could provide more opportunities for bed and breakfast operators and possibly allow the scale of existing operations to increase. What we've done is we have launched a research project in response to some specific applications and kind of explorations of existing regulations.
The underlying reason that people choose to run a bed and breakfast is that they love to share their homes with others.
Sometimes I feel guilty taking money for something that I really do enjoy doing.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The basis of selective harvest is keeping the medium-sized fish and releasing the really small and larger fish to continue to grow. In many cases, selective harvest requires some knowledge about water and the species you are fishing. Let us return to the archives with David Eiderson.
For a number of years now, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been pushing all sectors in the North Coast salmon fishery to move towards more selective harvesting methods in order to better preserve endangered stocks like coho. Recently, a workshop was held to note the progress that's been made and to talk about future endeavors. The department says it's pleased with how the industry has responded.
The projects have been a mix. There's been some real successes. There's been some apparent failures, but even the failures tell us something. I mean, that we gain knowledge from them. So where, we might not have gained any huge insights into being more selective, but still we have gained more knowledge on the stock.
There have been a lot of gear modifications and the development of new harvesting methods in the various sectors of the fishery. But according to DFO officials, there has to be more than just technological change.
The big jump is to move from that to increasing the knowledge, awareness, attitude, behavior of everybody in the industry. Because until everybody understands how some of this stuff will work, it's not going to work. Because some of it's very technical, some of it's very intensive, and people need to want to do it.
Some of the new selective methods have already been implemented into the regular fishery, and others may soon follow.
Some of the things that are discovered by seiners, the ramping and the brailing and sorting, that's already in the fishery and it's being improved all the time. The gill netters with daylight fishing is virtually a proven to avoid coho. Short sets is pretty well proven. We've already introduced that and we're probably going to refine that some more.
The North Coast gillnet fleet is probably the most concerned member of the commercial sector when it comes to implementing a selective harvesting method. For a few years now, gillnetters have been restricted in the amount of time they get on the fishing grounds because of questions about their ability to be selective. For the past 2 summers, the fleet has worked to prove that it can be selective and may have finally done it. In late July and early August of this year, 30 gillnet boats fished the Skeena River using new revival box technology, shorter set times, and various other methods to take another shot at showing it can avoid non-target species like coho while harvesting sockeye. The results of the fishery were quite promising.
We were able to prove that gillnet fishermen working in a fleet environment on an open-type fishery where they can go where they want to inside an open area, set their net how they like it, that we were able to achieve, in some of the cases, we were able to achieve coho survival rates of 70% or better for a considerable number of the people who participated.
One of the more interesting statistics to come from the study is the amount of time nets were left in the water in comparison to the survival rate of coho.
We found that for fairly short sets, up to 30 minutes in length, that we were getting an 87% survival rate on coho. That's coho returned to the water and swimming away in reasonable health that we expect to survive to make it to the spawning grounds.
When the results were first presented at the selective harvesting workshop, there were questions about their validity. O'Connor says that's not a concern.
We had a very close working relationship with the DFO when we set up the program, and we kept DFO informed, and when we started our analysis we did run it by fisheries, and the report that we got back was that they were satisfied with the validity of the data.
But will the results get gillnetters more time on the fishing grounds during salmon season this year? The DFO's North Coast Chief of Fisheries Management says it's too early to tell.
It's all very, very interesting. In a lot of cases, this is the first time that we as a department have seen this data as well. The raw data was collected this summer, as you know, and so it has to go through further analysis and just to see what exactly the experiment did tell us. But it's all very, very interesting. You can see that a lot of work was put into these projects, and now we just got to pull it all together and see what it all means.
I think that if the department accepts a study, and there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't, and if we can educate fishermen and show them how to properly take their fish out of the net, how to properly revive it in the revival boxes, and how to release them gently, then we can achieve certainly a fleet-wide 87% survival rate on any gillnet coho. And that means that we should be able to fish for a complete season.
The department does admit that there will be some difficult obstacles to overcome in order to implement the gillnet selective harvesting method in a fleet-wide fishery.
For instance, short set times is a challenge to implement in a full fleet situation. It looks right now on the surface of it that it's much, much better for survival. So we're looking at that very seriously.
We hope to see a change in that this year by enabling us to incorporate some of these new ideas. One of the real problems, and we have to grapple with, and we will grapple with, is one of enforcement. If you go to shorter set times, how do you monitor that? How do you enforce it? The industry believes we've got technological ideas now, technological fix that will enable us to provide the proper enforcement and be able to show DFO that we can indeed put these practices in place.
Certainly, DFO has used exclusive enforcement in many types of selective fishing to say it doesn't work, or if it does work, they don't know if it works, and so how can they give you credit for something that they aren't sure if it's working? And I guess that is a point. But quite frankly, their fishermen want to get out there fishing, and fishermen will ensure that, just as they have in the seine fleet, that gill netters aren't cheating. And I think there'll be a great deal of peer pressure once people see that there's a reward. And if the reward is you get to fish, then I think people will comply. If the reward is, if there's a punishment, that if you don't comply, you're out of the water, then I think that you'll get 100% compliance.
Now it will be a waiting game to see if the two sides can come to an agreement on how the selective fishery will move forward. The results of the study will be analyzed over the coming months and will most likely be heatedly debated when it comes time to put together a fishing plan for the next salmon season.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The saying, "in every crisis leads to an opportunity," is depending on how it's looked at. The word crisis comes from the Greek to separate, to shift, which means to pass judgment, to keep only what is worthwhile. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to bring you this news story from 2000.
It was a day of celebration as this class of Grade 2 dancers kicked off ceremonies for the opening of the new Wet'suwet'en office in Smithers. Quite a contrast to November 15, 1997. That's when the band and Hereditary Chief's office in Morristown went up in flames, destroying the building and valuable files and records and leaving them without a place to call home till now.
We have a central filing system now, which is something we've never been able to put together just because we're all over the place. We were in, I think, 6 different locations at one time for staff and trying to communicate, and the overhead costs were fairly high because we had to pay rent in each place. So now we're all unified, which is good.
Ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, officially open the Recorded Chief's office.
The new office is more like a nerve center for nearly all Wet'suwet'en operations, from finances to social services to culture camp coordination. On this special day, Andrew George Jr. is whipping up ice cream from Barry's, but you'll normally find him upstairs in the Land and Resources Department.
And we're trying to rebuild our nation, get involved with the forest industry, building capacity, the field jobs, the technical jobs, and professional jobs, so we can eventually participate in the local economy, the provincial economy, and the Canadian economy.
Treaty staff are also pleased to have everybody in one place.
I clearly think it's going to help being here. Treaty negotiations is all about relationships and understanding, and I think us moving into the town of Smithers is going to give us an opportunity for us to sit down at a common table and begin to understand where each of the parties are coming from and try and arrive at mutual accommodation.
What we would like to do is foster a working relationship with the Wet'suwet'en people, where we're determining the outcome of our communities within our community versus having the federal governments and the provincial governments dictating what they think would be best for our area.
Wet'suwet'en staff invite the public to drop into the office, which is on First Avenue, anytime they want.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.